So you've piqued the interest of a potential client and they've booked time on your calendar. It's time to celebrate your win, right? Not quite. An interested client doesn't necessarily mean a client that's ready to sign a contract. And unless your client has come through a referral, you're going to have to really prove that you have the chops to deliver what they want. For many new copywriters and even veteran copywriters, discovery calls can be tedious and stressful. And I get it. As writers, sometimes we just want to be left alone with our extra large coffee and our laptops and not speak to another human being for days. Or is that just me? With the right strategy, the right questions, and the right amount of confidence, you can blow your discovery calls right out of the water and make your potential clients excited to work with you. But before we get into it, my name's Liz. I'm a copywriter, content writer, and owner of an award-winning copywriting agency. And on this channel, you're going to find tools, tips, courses, and resources to help you launch, grow, and scale your copywriting business. Let's jump in. First, let's talk about what happens before you get on your discovery call. You need to know who you want to work with and who you don't. And if you're a new copywriter, it can be tempting to take any and all clients that come your way. But this only sets you up for disappointment and unhappy clients, because clients can definitely feel if the vibe isn't right or that you're not really into it. And knowing who you want to work with means two things: writing in a specific niche and client personality. So let's talk about both. First, niches. They say the riches are in the niches for a reason. Working within a niche grants you the opportunity to become a specialist rather than a generalist. And it's commonly accepted that specialists get paid way more. Plus, mastering a niche can help you simplify your copywriting business. You understand the industry, the market, the buyer personas, and you can streamline your research and writing process a lot more simply. For example, let's say you want to be a copywriter for skincare brands. You know you'll need to research in very specific ways how to speak to the common buyer personas, and you'll have a good idea of what works and what doesn't for that niche. Not to mention that you'll have a lot more of a streamlined process for your pre-writing, editing, and rewriting, and proofing, because you're going to be doing the same type of work every day. If you get on your discovery call and you find that that person is working in a niche that you don't specialize in or don't have any interest in specializing in, don't be afraid to tell the client that it's just not a good fit. But keep in mind that you don't have to niche down in order to make a great living as a copywriter. If you're open to multiple niches or you want to be a generalist, you can absolutely do so. After all, it's your freelance copywriting business and you are the boss. So start building your copywriting portfolio today. The next thing you consider when you think about who you want to work with is your ideal client personality. This one's really important, but it's actually sometimes really overlooked, and it can make or break your business. Like I mentioned before, especially if you're new, it can be tempting to sign on any and all clients. But if you don't jive with a certain personality type, that could backfire. I will give you a real life example. My ideal client personality is someone that takes their work seriously, but not necessarily themselves. The clients I work with are relaxed, down-to-earth people that know the value of hiring a copywriter, and they don't try to negotiate my prices down, and they're not micromanagers. I don't work with anyone that I wouldn't be friends with in real life. So if I ever get a nitpicky vibe, or I get the impression that this is the type of client who will want to call me 17 times on a Sunday night, or is completely disorganized, I don't sign the client. If you get one of those nightmare clients that tells you, I've hired 13 copywriters and I've fired them all because they could just never get it right, you are not going to be the exception. Even if it's really tempting to want to prove yourself because you know your stuff after all, trust me when I say if they've hired 12 copywriters that didn't get it right, you're inevitably gonna be number 13, no matter how good your copy is. Knowing who you want to work with and only working with those clients works out exceptionally well in the long run. You'll get better reviews, more referrals, and potentially develop long-term client relationships. So work with the people that you mesh with. So now let's talk about what happens when you get on your discovery calls. Tip number 1, take really good notes. And I mean really good notes. Even if you are absolutely sure that you're gonna remember details from the call, you're probably not. If you're not recording your discovery calls, and I recommend doing that, but always get permission to do so before you hit record, you need to take exceptionally good notes. I have an entire notebook dedicated to just my discovery calls. This way, even if I don't work with the client immediately, if they email me a month or two later and they're ready to get started, I can easily refer back to my notes. I mean, I guess we do live in a modern world. I could be taking notes on my computer, but no matter where you take notes, make sure that they're organized detailed, and readable. Tip number 2, don't offer pricing until you understand the full scope of the project. And this is a big one. Never, ever give your pricing until you understand the full scope of the project. In fact, I actually recommend never giving a quote over the phone at all. Number 1, because you want it in writing. And number 2, because you actually need time to go through and calculate the amount of time, research, and work that it's going to take to turn out a good product. You can give a ballpark estimate, yes. You can give a typical range. You can give a starting at price, but never give a client a firm price until they've given you every single detail that you need to work up an accurate proposal. And don't worry, we'll go over some questions to ask during your discovery call so that way you can work up that proposal. That'll come up in just a little bit. Tip number 3, don't be afraid to get a little personal. Sure, the point of a discovery call is to gauge whether or not there's a good fit between you and your client, but client relationships are not always built on just business alone. Your clients are more than just their business. Talk to them like people instead of just potential paychecks, because they are more than potential paychecks. And this isn't just to build the rapport either. Asking people questions about themselves helps you get into their head, further understanding who they are as a person, and that comes in handy when you go to write for them. Building relationships with your clients is a win-win. And I'm not saying you should ask your potential clients to go into details on their divorce or their problems with their mother. I'm saying you should ask questions like, where are you dialing in from? Or tell me the story about how you first started your business. What's life outside of business like? Or even, is that a cat I see in the background? Questions like that help you get a deeper understanding into their personality. But beyond the personal icebreaker questions, let's dive into the questions that you absolutely need to be asking on all of your discovery calls. And this is really the discovery part of the discovery calls. Knowing the right questions to ask will help you drill down into what your potential client actually wants. And asking the right questions shows your sense of professionalism and knowledge. Asking questions means building trust. So let's look at 10 questions you need to ask during your discovery calls. Number 1, what can you tell me about your upcoming copywriting needs? Start simple and leave it open-ended. Potential clients will usually tell you exactly what they need if you know how to listen. And it's important to note here that as a copywriter, sometimes you need to listen between the lines. We'll talk more about clarifying information a little bit later. Question 2, what led to your decision to hire a copywriter? This is where you'll find out if your client is someone who wants to DIY but can't, or if they're well-versed in writing copy but don't have time, or if they might need a little bit more hand-holding during the project. Question 3, have you hired other copywriters in the past? Remember when I mentioned that giant glaring red flag, the one where the client says that they've hired a dozen copywriters and none of them have worked out? I've hired 13 copywriters and I've fired them all because they could just never get it right. This is where the truth comes out. Think of your potential client like a date. If your client takes you to a restaurant and they treat the waitstaff poorly, they're going to treat you poorly. The same thing applies to client relationships. Pay attention to how they talk about their previous writers. And if it's a red flag, run. Just run. Question 4. What are your expectations of a copywriter? This question sets the stage for the project and how you best can make the client happy, as well as helps you determine whether or not this client is a good fit for you. Ask clarifying questions, such as how often they expect updates on a project, whether or not they have preliminary work done, such as brand guidelines or an ideal client avatar. Question 5, how would you describe your communication style? Every client's communication style is different. Some clients will just give you a brief and send you on your way, and you won't hear from them until the due date. And some clients are going to want weekly or bi-weekly check-ins. Ask your potential clients their preferred methods of communication. Some clients will want to invite you to their Slack channel, email only, and some work just on messaging apps. And word of advice here, don't rely solely on spoken communication. Keep everything in writing so that way you can refer back to the conversation when necessary. Question 6. What led you to explore my services as a solution? Not only is this a great way to find out how a potential client found you in the first place, it's great to find out what originally piqued their interest about you specifically. Question 7. What specific characteristics are you looking for in a copywriter? This will give you insight into what exactly someone is looking for in copywriting support. This question is really similar to what are your expectations of a copywriter, but it will yield very different responses. Question 8. What factors are you considering when hiring a copywriter? With this one, you might get answers regarding price, availability, and experience. Question 9, when do you foresee making a decision on a copywriting hire? Some clients are just exploring their options, while other clients are ready to get their name on that contract the moment they join your Zoom call. The answer to this question will help you set expectations and discover how serious your potential client is about hiring copywriting support. And question number 10, what would it take for you to join my client roster today? This question will give you even further insight to what your prospect actually wants. If they have any hesitation at all, this is where they come out and you can address them. These 10 questions to ask during a discovery call may seem simple, but they'll provide you with the insight and information to decide whether or not the client is the right fit for you, how best to support them, and how to set expectations. So now that you know what questions to ask, let's go into some other tips for acing your discovery calls. Because discovery calls aren't just a Q&A session. For a successful discovery call, you want to not only ask the right questions, but you want to show your potential client that you're actively listening and engaged in the conversation. How interested you are in the conversation is a direct indicator of how invested you'll be in their projects. Remember that. So here are a few things you should do. Repeat back key information. Phrases like, what I heard was, or it sounds like you're looking for, validates your potential client's concerns and shows that you're actively listening. Repeating back key pieces of the conversation helps your potential client feel heard. Next, this one's gonna sound kind of small, but it's actually really important. Let your potential client know that you'll be taking notes. And I know it sounds silly, but hear me out. Depending on how your webcam is positioned, your potential client might not actually see that you're taking notes, and it'll just look like you're looking off screen or messing around with your phone. Besides, pointing out that you're taking notes is a great way to show your client that you're listening to them and that you're paying attention to detail. Next tip, add value and showcase your expertise. Hey, you're a professional. That's why they booked a call with you. Don't be afraid to jump in with feedback or valuable bits of information. I'll give you a real life example. I have a pretty extensive marketing background. When a client talks to me about writing their email copy, I'll ask them about their current open rates and then offer tidbits of information on how email deliverability works, and then give them a few pointers on how to keep their emails out of the spam folder. Providing value leaves your prospect feeling like you've already made an impact. And next, don't get off the call without an action item from both sides. Don't end the call without planning your next communication. During the call, ask your potential client if they have any examples of copy that they like, or links to their competitors, any project notes, or anything else that can help you put together a proposal, and let them know that you'll be following up on the call with an email. Planning out your next interaction helps keep those lines of communication open. And follow up on call notes within 24 hours. Sum up your notes, pull out the most important pieces of information, and give a brief summary of the call, reiterating brief, and either include your proposal or give them an estimated time and date of when they should expect your proposal. If you've promised to send additional bits of information, such as references or other pieces from your portfolio, or a link to an article that you mentioned, remember to include these in the follow-up email. And don't be afraid to follow up on the call. If they've told you to expect a response within 2 weeks, and it's been 3, show back up in their inbox. Be persistent, but not annoying. If you don't have a solid yes after submitting your proposal, and they haven't told you that they're still reviewing it, this is where you can ask if they have any concerns regarding your proposal, and then you can address any objections. You can smash your discovery calls. As a freelance copywriter, you're responsible for landing your own clients, which includes the discovery part of the sales process. Even if the thought of conducting a discovery call makes you super nervous, with enough preparation and enough practice, you'll find your flow and you'll be completely acing your discovery calls in no time. And if you need an extra boost in your copywriting skills, you can download my free ebook, The Circa Method, the complete beginner's guide to writing wildly effective sales pages, for free in the description box below. And if you like what you saw here today, I would love it if you gave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. I'll catch you next time.